The Kravax surveillance drones dispersed around Earth's orbit, their cloaking technology rendering them invisible to conventional human detection systems. Each drone was a marvel of engineering. Organic components seamlessly integrated with quantum computing cores, allowing them to process and analyze vast amounts of data about the unsuspecting planet below. On the flagship Inevitable Conquest, Commander Zorith reviewed the preliminary reports with growing satisfaction. The atmospheric composition was ideal for Kravax physiology. They wouldn't need extensive terraforming. The abundance of liquid water and mineral resources exceeded expectations. Most importantly, the dominant species appeared to be in a particularly vulnerable developmental stage. Advanced enough to have built useful infrastructure, but not advanced enough to detect or repel a superior force. "Look at them," Zorith growled to his subordinates, gesturing toward a holographic display showing scenes from cities around Earth. Thousands of independent nation-states, constant internal conflicts, primitive projectile weapons. The species can't even agree on basic planetary governance. Science Officer Vleric's facial plates shifted in the Kravax expression of hesitation. "Commander, with respect, I've noted some anomalies in the behavioral analysis. Their adaptability metrics exceed anything in our database, and their social cooperation indices show unusual patterns. Save your scientific fascinations for after the conquest," Zorith interrupted, his voice dropping to a dangerous rumble. "I've studied the combat capabilities. Their most advanced weapons would barely penetrate our scout vessel's shielding." Vleric persisted, a risky move given Zorith's infamous temper. "Sir, it's my duty to report that their psychological profiles don't match any previous conquest species. They show simultaneous capacity for extreme violence and remarkable altruism, even toward members of different genetic lineages or completely different species. Irrelevant." Zorith dismissed with a slash of his clawed hand. "Prepare the fleet for arrival. Standard Conquest Protocol. Orbital Supremacy Demonstration. Ultimatum Broadcast. Then Methodical Resource Appropriation." As Vleric retreated, Tactical Officer Drex approached with visible eagerness. "Commander, shall I prepare termination calculations for resistance centers? My analysis suggests we can reduce military capability by 87% with targeted strikes on just 140 locations." Zorith's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Always so eager for the kill, Drex. Yes, prepare your calculations. But remember, we need sufficient survival numbers for resource extraction labor." Back on Earth, in her cramped office at Mauna Kea Observatory, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was staring at her computer screen with growing unease. For 3 consecutive nights, she had detected anomalous readings in near-Earth orbit, subtle distortions in electromagnetic patterns that matched no known satellite or space debris profiles. The distortions moved with purpose, repositioning in ways that suggested intelligent direction. When she brought her findings to the observatory director, she was met with skeptical dismissal. "Probably just atmospheric interference, Yuki, or equipment calibration issues. We got enough real phenomena to study without chasing ghosts." But Tanaka couldn't shake her certainty. That night, she bypassed standard protocols and redirected one of the observatory's secondary arrays, fine-tuning it to specifically track the anomalies she detected. As data streamed in, she felt a chill run down her spine. The patterns were unmistakable, multiple objects in precise orbital formations, occasionally exchanging compressed data bursts. With trembling hands, she reached for her phone, scrolling to a contact she'd never expected to use, her former college roommate who now worked for the Pentagon's Space Defense Division. "Melissa, it's Yuki. I need you to look at something. And please, keep this between us until you see the data." She paused, taking a deep breath. "I think we're being watched." Little did Dr. Tanaka know, her discovery had come 3 weeks too late. The Kravax invasion fleet had already entered the outer solar system, its massive engines burning silent and cold as they decelerated toward their unsuspecting prey. Earth had 21 days before first contact. 21 days of blissful ignorance before humanity would face the greatest threat in its history. The world watched in collective awe as humanity's newest space venture, the International Mars Initiative's Pathfinder I, rose majestically from Kennedy Space Center. Global networks broadcast the launch live to billions of viewers, celebrating this next step in peaceful space exploration. At Mission Control, Flight Director Imani Washington monitored telemetry with practiced calm. Pathfinder I showing nominal performance, T+3 minutes, and proceeding to stage separation. The cheers died in throats as reality warped above the rocket. A shimmer in the atmosphere solidified into a massive angular shape, its obsidian surface absorbing rather than reflecting sunlight. Before anyone could process what they were seeing, a violet beam lanced downward. Pathfinder II, along with its crew of 12, vanished in a silent flash of light. For 17 excruciating seconds, broadcast feeds continued transmitting stunned silence. Then screens worldwide flickered and turned to static before resolving to show an alien visage that would soon haunt humanity's collective nightmares. Commander Zorith's face filled every display, reptilian yet insectoid, with armored plates and compound eyes that gleamed with cold intelligence. Standing nearly 8 feet tall based on surrounding scale references, his exoskeleton bore elaborate markings that Dr. Martinez would later identify as kill tallies from previous conquests. "Humans," he announced, his digitally translated voice unnaturally flat, yet somehow conveying immense disdain. "Your world is now property of the Kravax Dominion. You have 7 rotations to surrender your governments and resources." The feed cut to orbital footage of Antarctica. A flash of light, then a massive impact as a controlled asteroid strike hit the uninhabited continent. Seismographs worldwide registered the impact, and tsunami warnings activated across the southern hemisphere. Zorith reappeared. Resistance means extinction. The transmission ended with footage of another planet, lush and green in the first frame, then progressively reduced to a smoldering, barren wasteland. Panic erupted globally. Stock markets crashed within minutes. Religious gatherings formed spontaneously in streets. Military forces worldwide went to maximum alert, though no one knew what defense might be effective against such technology. At the hastily convened UN emergency session, representatives from 193 nations gathered in unprecedented unity. The Secretary General's opening words captured the moment's gravity. Humanity faces an existential crisis requiring immediate, unified response. National differences are now irrelevant. We must act as one species or perish divided. Meanwhile, in a secure bunker beneath the Pentagon, Dr. Elena Martinez hunched over her workstation, surrounded by linguistics experts and supercomputers. Having lost her parents and brother to ethnic cleansing in her childhood, Martinez had dedicated her life to understanding how language shapes conflict. Now, that expertise might help save her species. "The translation algorithm they're using is remarkable," she told the assembled military leaders. "It's not just converting words, it's adapting cultural concepts to approximate human understanding." General Reed leaned forward. "Can you reverse engineer it? Find weaknesses in their communications?" "Better," Martins replied, eyes never leaving her screens. "I'm building a comprehensive model of their language structure, which will reveal cognitive patterns. Language isn't just communication. It's a window into how a species thinks." For 72 sleepless hours, Martinez and her team analyzed every phoneme, syntax pattern, and semantic choice in the Kravax transmission. When breakthrough came, it was 3:17 a.m., and Martinez was the only one still awake, running on stimulants and determination. "My God," she whispered, staring at the spectrograms. She frantically awakened her colleagues and requested an emergency briefing with military command. 2 hours later, she presented her findings to the Joint Chiefs and scientific advisors. "The Kravax language contains embedded classification markers," she explained, pointing to sound pattern analyses. Every reference to another species includes subharmonic indicators, placing them into hierarchical categories. We're classified with the same markers used for what translates roughly as feeding stock or resource species. So they see us as cattle, General Reed said grimly. Yes, but there's something else. Martinez continued, highlighting another pattern. There are specific stress patterns, what we might call fear markers, embedded in references to potential resistance. Their language contains ancestral memory indicators suggesting evolutionary trauma from apex-level threats. She pulled up comparative xenobiology models. The Kravaks evolved as pack hunters, but their planet likely had even more dangerous predators. Their psychology is built around dominance hierarchies, but with deeply ingrained fear responses to specific threat patterns. And how does this help us? Demanded the Secretary of Defense. Martinez's eyes gleamed with realization that had kept her awake through the night. Because humans display behavioral patterns that trigger their unconscious fear responses, we're not just prey in their eyes, we're showing characteristics their species evolved to fear. At the same moment, in a secure facility at NORAD, Dr. Yuki Tanaka was presenting her own findings to military intelligence. The surveillance pattern wasn't random, she explained, showing orbital tracking data. They were systematically testing our detection and response capabilities, like poking different parts of an organism to see how it reacts. Colonel Harris frowned. And what did they learn from us? That's what's fascinating, Tanaka replied. They were clearly expecting specific response patterns, probably based on previous conquests. But human responses don't follow their expected model. She displayed reaction time analyses. They're expecting either immediate surrender or predictable defensive patterns. They have no template for how humans actually behave when threatened. As dawn broke on day 4 of the crisis, 2 critical insights emerged from separate facilities. The Kravaks had evolutionary weak points humans could exploit, and humanity's unique response patterns might be our greatest weapon, because to the invaders, we were unlike anything they had ever encountered before. Day 3 after the ultimatum dawned over a transformed Earth. In orbit, Kravak surveillance specialist Mev Korix compiled her daily report for Commander Zorith with increasing perplexity. Sir, human behavior continues to deviate from all established conquest response models, she reported, mandibles twitching nervously. Previous subject species exhibited predictable patterns. Governmental collapse, mass population flight from urban centers, resource hoarding, or hierarchical consolidation of defenses around ruling elites. She displayed holographic imagery from around the planet. Humans are doing something else entirely. Zorith's attention sharpened. Explain. They appear to be simultaneously centralizing and decentralizing. Mev Korix continued, struggling with the contradictory concept. Global communication has increased by 740% rather than fragmenting. Former enemy states are sharing military assets, and civilian population behavior is unprecedented. The displays showed scenes from around the world. In Seoul, engineers retooled semiconductor manufacturing lines to produce experimental shield components. In Mumbai, thousands of programmers coordinated a distributed computing project to analyze Kravak's transmission patterns. In Rio de Janeiro, civilian drone enthusiasts modified their equipment for high-altitude reconnaissance. Their social organization defies hierarchical categorization, Mev Korix concluded. It's as if the entire species functions as a hybrid collective individual entity under threat. Zorith dismissed her with a gesture, but his inner eyelids flickered rapidly, a Kravak sign of deep uncertainty. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, Captain Wei Zhang stood before a wall of screens, his normally immaculate uniform rumpled from 3 days without rest. At 42, Zhang had built his reputation on unconventional warfare doctrine. Now that thinking might save his species. Traditional military response is suicide, he explained to the assembled international tactical group. The technology gap is insurmountable in conventional terms. On the largest screen, Colonel Sarah Ndlova nodded in agreement from her Nairobi command center. At 38, the Kenyan Special Forces leader had spent her career perfecting asymmetric warfare techniques against superior firepower. "We need to weaponize our unpredictability," she said, her calm voice belying the intensity in her eyes. "The Kravaks expect either surrender or a centralized defense they can decapitate." Zhang manipulated the tactical display. "Exactly. So we give them neither. Operation Honeybee is built on swarm intelligence principles, autonomous cells coordinating without central control." For the next hour, they outlined a defense strategy unlike anything in military history, a planet-wide network of resistance cells following basic algorithmic rules that would create emergent coordinated behavior without predictable command structures for the Kravaks to target. "This will require civilian integration on an unprecedented scale," Ndlova cautioned. Zhang smiled grimly. "Already happening. Look at this." The display shifted to show live streams from around the world. Japanese fishing fleets practicing synchronized maneuvers, Brazilian football stadiums converted to drone training centers, Kenyan wildlife trackers teaching urban dwellers ambush techniques developed for anti-poaching operations. "Humanity's greatest strength has always been our ability to form ad hoc cooperative groups across traditional boundaries," Zhang noted. "The Kravaks evolved as rigid pack hunters. They literally cannot comprehend our social flexibility." In the Nevada desert, another unprecedented collaboration was underway. Inside a hastily expanded facility at Area 51, Dr. Ibrahim Khan watched as Russian aerospace engineers worked alongside American quantum computing specialists to bring his theoretical shield technology into reality. The mathematics were sound. The Pakistani physicist explained to the Joint Scientific Committee, "But I estimated we were 20 years from practical application." Now, he gestured to the prototype, where Russian vacuum chamber technology, mated with American superconductors and Indian software. 3 days of global scientific cooperation has accomplished what might have taken decades in isolation. Dr. Elena Martinez had been airlifted to the facility to establish communication protocols with the Kravaks. After days of intensive analysis, she had constructed a rudimentary translation matrix that went beyond the Kravaks' own system, incorporating the subtle biological signaling embedded in their language. "They don't just communicate with words," she explained to the assembled leaders. "Their language carries dominant/submissive markers in subharmonic frequencies. If we respond using standard translation, we automatically place ourselves in the subordinate position." Her team had prepared Earth's first official communication to the Kravaks, carefully constructed to avoid submission markers while also not triggering immediate aggression. But rather than offering surrender terms, the message contained a single question about Kravaks' intentions toward Earth's non-human species. When the reply came, it was broadcast to all command centers. "Your species' primitive unity displays and concern for lesser life forms are irrelevant. Prepare for subjugation." In Rio de Janeiro, Resistance Coordinator Luisa Camara watched the translation with her team of volunteer activists. "They still don't understand what they're dealing with," she said, her fingers flying over her keyboard as she distributed updated encryption protocols to the global network. "They threaten not just humans, but every living thing on our planet. That's not how you get Earth to surrender. That's how you make sure we fight to the last person standing." As night fell on day 3, an unprecedented global broadcast reached nearly every human on the planet. Speaking from a secure location, the UN Secretary-General addressed humanity not as separate nations, but as a species facing extinction. "We have always defined ourselves by our differences: nation, religion, ideology. Today, we are reminded that these distinctions are luxuries of a species not fighting for its survival. The Kravaks expect us to surrender or to fight as we have always fought each other, divided and predictable. They don't understand that humans, when truly threatened, are capable of something remarkable. We can set aside centuries of conflict to face a common enemy. They see our compassion and cooperation as weakness. In 4 days, we will show them that these qualities make us the most dangerous species they have ever encountered. Aboard the Kravax flagship, Commander Zorith reviewed the final invasion plans, silencing the growing concerns among his officers with threats and displays of dominance. Yet in the privacy of his quarters, he found himself obsessively reviewing the surveillance data, searching for patterns that would explain the strange unease growing within him, a feeling no Kravax commander was supposed to experience before a conquest. Doubt. The ultimatum's deadline expired at dawn, Greenwich Mean Time. In the Kravax Command Center, Commander Zorith performed the traditional pre-conquest ritual, marking his facial plates with luminescent compounds that would glow with the energy signatures of the conquered world. "Begin standard planetary subjugation sequence," he ordered, his voice carrying the formal tones of a ceremony performed 47 times before. "Tactical Officer Drex, you may commence primary target elimination." Drex's mandibles clicked in anticipation as he activated the targeting systems. The main view screen displayed a global map with 140 primary military installations marked for the first strike wave. His clawed appendage hovered over the execution control. First wave targeting locked. Firing in 3, 2. The command center lurched violently as warning signals blared through the ship. Half the targeting displays flickered and died, while others showed weapons discharging at empty ocean or uninhabited deserts. "Report," Zorith bellowed. The tactical systems officer frantically analyzed the cascading failures. "Unknown interference pattern, Commander. Our targeting systems are experiencing synchronized disruption across multiple frequencies." On Earth, in the underground command center beneath NORAD, Major Alvarez watched the incoming attack with grim satisfaction. For 3 days, her team of hackers and electronic warfare specialists had analyzed every microsecond of Kravax transmissions, identifying patterns in their targeting protocols. "Electromagnetic spoofing successful," she reported to General Reed. Phase 1 countermeasures redirected approximately 60% of initial strikes to non-critical areas. The general nodded tensely. "That bought us time, but they'll adapt quickly. Proceed to Phase 2. Around the world, pre-positioned electronic warfare platforms, some military, many hastily repurposed civilian systems, activated simultaneously, creating a global electronic defense grid unlike anything the Kravax had encountered in previous conquests. In orbit, Zorith raged at his tactical team. "Recalibrate all targeting systems. Deploy dropships immediately. We will secure ground objectives while the interference is identified and eliminated." Within minutes, hundreds of Kravax landing craft punched through Earth's atmosphere. Sleek, predatory shapes designed to instill terror in primitive species. Their pilots anticipated token resistance at most, followed by the mass surrenders that typically accompanied Kravax ground operations. Instead, they encountered a planet that had transformed itself into a multi-layered defense system. In Lagos, Nigeria, the first wave of dropships encountered inexplicable atmospheric turbulence as they descended toward the city's military installations. Weather control systems, originally designed to mitigate the effects of climate change, had been reprogrammed to create violent microbursts and air density fluctuations precisely calibrated to the Kravax ship's aerodynamic profiles. "They're using their climate technology as a weapon," reported a disbelieving pilot as his ship tumbled through violent wind shear. Those that made it through the atmospheric defenses faced another surprise. Instead of centralized resistance at military bases, they encountered distributed defense networks integrated throughout civilian infrastructure. Every city block became a potential ambush point. In Singapore, Kravax ground troops moved confidently through the financial district, their superior physiology and battle armor making them nearly invulnerable to conventional firearms. Then the buildings themselves seemed to attack. Facade panels detached to block advance routes, ventilation systems pumped aerosol irritants specifically tailored to Kravax biology, and precision-timed electromagnetic pulses disrupted their neural implants. Commander Zorith watched in mounting disbelief as casualty reports flooded in from around the planet. How are they coordinating these attacks? We've neutralized all their major command centers. The answer would have been incomprehensible to the hierarchical Kravak's mind. Earth's defense wasn't being centrally coordinated. It was emerging from millions of autonomous decisions made by individuals following basic protocols established by Operation Honeybee. The defense adapted in real time, with successes replicated and failures abandoned without requiring central authority. But the most shocking resistance came in the mountains of Afghanistan. Staff Sergeant Maya Jackson, a 29-year-old Marine with 3 combat tours and numerous commendations, had been selected to lead what appeared to be a suicide mission. Her team of 12 specialists represented 5 nations and diverse military backgrounds, united by exceptional adaptability and psychological resilience. Talon Force, this is Steel Mantis, Jackson transmitted as Kravak's dropships descended toward their position, initiating Operation P. Piper. For the next 4 hours, Jackson's team executed a masterful fighting retreat through the Hindu Kush Mountains. Every engagement was precisely calculated, enough resistance to keep the Kravaks in pursuit, but never enough to warrant orbital strikes. The alien force, commanded by Sub-Commander Krell, followed with growing frustration as the humans seemed to always escape complete encirclement. These particular humans are demonstrating superior tactical awareness, Krell reported to the flagship. Request permission to deploy heavy assault units to terminate. Granted, Zorith replied. But capture their command unit if possible. I want to understand their unusual resistance pattern. Unknown to the Kravaks, every moment of pursuit was part of Jackson's plan. Her team had spent days preparing the mountain passes, placing sensors to gather data on Kravak's physiology, weapons capabilities, armor specifications, and tactical algorithms. They move like pack predators, Jackson observed quietly as her team watched through thermal scopes, always maintaining formation integrity even when it slows them down. Predictable flanking patterns. They've evolved as apex hunters, but they've never had to adapt their tactics. When the team reached the designated valley, the trap was sprung. Specialist Rodrigo activated the seismic charges placed days earlier on multiple mountain faces. As avalanches thundered down, the team's combat engineers activated electromagnetic pulse generators specifically calibrated to the frequencies used by Kravak's neural implants. The resulting chaos was total. Caught between avalanches, and with their communications disrupted, the Kravaks force fragmented for the first time, their hierarchical command structure collapsing without central coordination. Jackson's team paid a heavy price, 7 of 12 killed or critically wounded during the engagement and subsequent extraction. But the data transmitted from their specialized sensors would prove invaluable, providing Earth's first detailed analysis of Kravak's combat capabilities. In his command center, Zorith received the comprehensive casualty reports with stunned disbelief. Nearly 30% of ground forces lost or incapacitated, a figure unprecedented in Kravak's conquest history. Several dropships destroyed by seemingly primitive countermeasures employed in unpredictable combinations. Ground commanders reporting an inability to establish secure operational areas due to fluid asymmetric resistance. Order a general withdrawal to orbital positions. He finally commanded, the words bitter in his throat. We will reassess tactical approach. His second-in-command, Vexhar, watched him with careful neutrality. Commander, how can they fight like this? We've observed them continuing to fight despite grievous injuries, sacrificing themselves to protect tactical data, adapting strategies mid-battle. No rational species would accept such losses in initial engagements. Zorith had no answer. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt a cold sensation spreading through his thoracic cavity, a neurological response no Kravaks commander was supposed to experience. On his private view screen, he replayed footage of Sergeant Jackson's last stand, watching in incomprehension as the wounded human continued fighting even after sustaining mortal injuries, using her final moments to ensure her team's data transmission completed. What Zorith couldn't understand, what no Kravaks could comprehend, was that he wasn't facing a species that feared death more than defeat. He was facing humanity, a species that had evolved knowing death was inevitable, but choosing what to die for was the definition of freedom. Beneath the glacial lake of Geneva lay one of humanity's most sophisticated research facilities, repurposed from a particle physics laboratory into the primary xenological research center. In the 3 days since the first engagement, the facility had transformed into a hive of activity as scientists from dozens of disciplines worked to understand their adversary. Dr. Elena Martinez hadn't slept in 36 hours. Her office walls were covered with linguistic maps, behavioral analyses, and biological schematics. But her current focus was the facility's most valuable asset, the 3-meter-tall figure secured behind the molecularly reinforced observation wall. Sub-Commander Krell had been captured during the Afghanistan operation when his dropship was disabled by a precisely targeted electromagnetic pulse. Unlike the common soldiers in his command, Krell's neural implants included an emergency medical protocol that had saved him from the brain damage that killed his subordinates when their implants failed. He sat rigidly in his specially constructed containment area, his imposing physiology evident even in captivity. Kravacs were powerfully built, with exoskeletal reinforcement around vital areas and musculature adapted to their high-gravity homeworld. Krell's facial plates bore the distinctive markings of command rank, and his multifaceted eyes tracked every movement beyond his enclosure with predatory intensity. "Your species will be processed into service units or nutrition sources," he informed Dr. Martins during their 5th interview session. "This temporary setback changes nothing. The Dominion has conquered 47 worlds. Resistance is ultimately futile." Martinez had abandoned traditional interrogation approaches after the first 2 frustrating days. The Kravak's hierarchical psychology made Krell immune to standard techniques. His absolute certainty in his species' superiority rendered threats meaningless, while appeals to cooperation were interpreted as submission behaviors. Instead, she had implemented what her team called Immersion Protocol, systematically exposing Krell to Earth's complexity in ways that challenged his rigid categorical worldview. "Today I thought we'd discuss something different," Martins said, deliberately casual. "I'd like your perspective on Earth's biodiversity." She activated a display showing a montage of Earth ecosystems, from vibrant coral reefs to windswept tundra, dense rainforests to arid deserts. "Your world has remarkable environmental variation," Krell acknowledged with clinical detachment. "Inefficient from a resource management perspective, but aesthetically interesting. And yet life thrives in all these environments," Martins noted. "Evolution on Earth didn't produce a single dominant species until very recently. Instead, it created millions of specialized adaptations." She showed him footage of interspecies cooperation, cleaner fish with sharks, bird-mammal symbiosis, plant-insect relationships. "We think this might explain something fundamental about humans," she continued. "Our earliest ancestors weren't apex predators. We were persistence hunters who succeeded through cooperation and adaptation rather than physical dominance." Day by day, she systematically deconstructed Krell's assumptions about humanity, showing him global response coordination, human artistic expressions diversity, the unexpected ways humans organize socially. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, when a technical malfunction briefly displayed a security feed from the facility's medical bay. Krell watched in visible confusion as human doctors worked frantically to stabilize injured Kravak soldiers captured during the initial engagements. The medical team was using synthetic blood reserves, a precious resource during the conflict, to treat alien combatants. "Why preserve non-viable combat units?" he demanded when Martinez arrived for their next session. "Your resources should prioritize your own kind." "That's not how humans work," she explained simply. "We see sentient beings, not combat units. We fight fiercely, but we don't abandon compassion, even for enemies." This fundamental contradiction, humans as both more vicious fighters and more compassionate caretakers than any species the Kravaks had encountered, created the first crack in Krell's certainty. Meanwhile, throughout the facility, Research teams made critical discoveries about their adversary. Dr. Tanaka's xenobiology group had determined the Kravax had evolved on a high-gravity world with intense resource competition, developing into pack-hunting apex predators with hierarchical social structures. Their technological approach similarly valued overwhelming force over adaptability. Their entire civilization mirrors their evolutionary history, she explained during the daily briefing. Rigid hierarchies, strength-based advancement, intolerance for perceived weakness. Their social organization has essentially remained unchanged despite their technological advancement. Most significantly, Dr. Khan's team had identified a critical vulnerability while studying captured neural implants. The Kravax network that connects their military hierarchy depends on predictable frequency patterns, he reported, displaying complex waveform analyses. It's a necessary architectural flaw. Their brains cannot process rapid adaptations, so their communication system must maintain certain stability parameters. As this intelligence disseminated to Earth's defense networks, humanity's resistance evolved. Armed with understanding of Kravax psychology, biology, and technology, defensive strategies became increasingly effective. In orbit, Commander Zorith paced his private chamber, fury building with each failed offensive. He had called in reinforcements from 3 nearby conquered worlds, quadrupling his fleet size. His officers had developed new assault protocols incorporating lessons from the initial failures. "We will burn their resistance to ash," he promised during the command briefing. No species defies the Dominion. But beneath his bravado, something had changed. For the first time in his long career of conquest, Zorith found himself obsessively reviewing combat footage, searching for patterns that might explain humanity's unexpected resistance. After dismissing his officers, he accessed a private data channel to review classified historical records, specifically accounts of the only known Kravax military defeat, centuries earlier against a now-extinct species in the Cygnus sector. Computer, isolate behavioral similarities between historical Cygnus resistance and current human tactics, he ordered. The artificial intelligence processed for several moments before responding. Analysis complete. Behavioral convergence, 82%. Tactical adaptability, 93% correlation. Distributed command structure, 97% correlation. Zorith's inner eyelids flickered rapidly, the Kravax equivalent of cold dread. The Cygnus campaign had nearly destroyed the early Dominion. Only the species' vulnerability to a bioengineered pathogen had saved the Kravax from potentially losing their first interstellar war. Computer, probability assessment. Does human biology share vulnerability markers with Cygnus physiology? Negative. Human cellular structure provides no compatible vector for existing Dominion bioweapons. Zorith closed the historical file and stared at the holographic representation of Earth rotating before him. He didn't recognize the emotion driving his obsessive analysis, something humans would immediately identify as existential doubt. For the first time, he faced an adversary that might not only resist, but potentially threaten the Dominion itself. Our initial engagement followed standard protocols that have succeeded across 47 worlds. Zorith continued, his voice hardened with determination. The humans exploited our predictability. This assault will employ randomized attack vectors and simultaneous multi-point engagement. Victory is inevitable. On Earth, the Unified Defense Council faced their own grim calculations. In a hardened facility beneath Mount Yamato, General Okonkwo displayed simulation after simulation ending in defeat. "We've analyzed every conventional defensive strategy," she concluded. "Their reinforced fleet presents overwhelming firepower. We can't win a traditional space battle." Captain Zhang, her uniform bearing the new insignia of Earth's Unified Tactical Command, rose from her seat. "Then we don't fight conventionally." For the next hour, she outlined Operation Hornet Swarm, while Colonel Ndlovu added tactical refinements. The strategy was so radical that several military leaders called it suicidal. By the session's end, Even the skeptics realized it might be humanity's only chance. 48 hours later, as the Kravax fleet moved into attack formation, their sensors detected something unprecedented, not the expected defensive perimeter of military vessels, but thousands of small signatures launching from every continent. "What am I seeing?" Zorth demanded, staring at the tactical display. His sensor officer's mandibles twitched in confusion. "Unknown, Commander. Multiple small craft, most appear to be civilian vessels." The screen showed fishing trawlers retrofitted with jamming equipment, commercial aircraft carrying experimental EMP devices, oil platforms reconfigured as launch sites for thousands of miniature drones. From Madagascar to Iceland, Brazil to Japan, every coastline bristled with improvised naval forces. "They're sending civilians against our battle fleet," Tactical Officer Drex asked incredulously. "Reconfigure targeting systems for mass small target elimination." As the Kravax weapon systems recalibrated for the unexpected threat pattern, Special Forces teams from 27 nations attached to key Kravax vessels. Using reverse-engineered gravity manipulation technology, they clung to the hulls of destroyers and supply ships, thermal camouflage concealing them from external sensors. The chaotic battle that followed defied all Kravax military doctrine. Their fleet, optimized for precision strikes against centralized opposition, found itself swarmed from all vectors. Targeting computers struggled to prioritize among thousands of constantly shifting threats. Most critically, their rigid command structure couldn't adapt quickly enough to the deliberate chaos humanity had created. Aboard the Indomitable, Zorth's secondary command destroyer, proximity alarms blared as internal sensors detected a hull breach in the engineering section. Security feeds showed a small team fighting through Kravax defenders, humans wearing mismatched equipment, but moving with coordinated precision. "Seal all compartments and deploy internal defense drones," ordered Security Chief Frex, following standard containment protocol. The human team, later identified as a mixed unit of Brazilian naval commandos and Norwegian sabotage specialists, had trained specifically to counter these measures. They split into smaller units, using electromagnetic disruptors to confuse internal sensors and thermal charges to misdirect security responses. Rather than attempting to destroy the ship's power core, a heavily defended target, they targeted the power regulation system, a vulnerability identified through Krell's intelligence. The precisely placed charges created a cascade failure that Kravax engineers had never anticipated, because no previous opponent had employed a strategy likely to result in mutual destruction. The Indomitable's superstructure began to buckle as power surges overwhelmed internal containment fields. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut too late as the cascade spread through critical systems. From the bridge of his flagship, Zorth watched in stunned disbelief as his secondary command vessel tore itself apart, secondary explosions rippling along its length before the main power core detonated in a blinding flash. As the massive vessel broke apart against Earth's atmosphere, a shockwave of disbelief rippled through the Kravax communication network. For the first time in their expansion history, they'd lost a major battle cruiser to a technologically inferior species. Across the fleet, lower-ranking officers began questioning the infallibility of command decisions. When Zorth ordered 3 ship captains executed for suggesting tactical withdrawal, the murmurs of doubt intensified rather than diminished. Commander Zorth's flagship bore the scars of 3 consecutive days of failed offensives. Exposed conduits sparked in the once immaculate command center. The holographic tactical display flickered intermittently, distorting the battle updates that grew more concerning by the hour. More troubling than the physical damage was the change in his officers. Zorth noticed the subtle signs of fracturing discipline. Hesitations before acknowledging orders, exchanged glances during tactical briefings, whispered conversations that ceased when he approached. The Kravax neural network, designed to transmit command certainty throughout the fleet, now carried something far more dangerous: doubt. "Our forces are designed for swift victory," his chief strategist explained during a private consultation, mandibles tight with tension. Prolonged resistance destabilizes our combat psychology. The humans, conversely, appear to grow more coordinated under pressure. Zorth slammed his armored fist into the display, shattering it. They are primitives. How can they resist the might of the Dominion? In Geneva, Dr. Martinez had assembled an unprecedented team: game theorists, cultural anthropologists, military psychological warfare experts, and information warfare specialists from 23 nations. For weeks, they had dissected Kravax communications intercepted during battles, building a comprehensive model of their enemy psyche. Their entire society is structured around dominance displays, Martinez explained to Earth's Leadership Council during a secure transmission. They literally cannot comprehend an inferior species inflicting significant losses. It violates their evolutionary programming. The team had developed Operation Fractured Mirror, a psychological warfare campaign specifically targeting the Kravax command structure. Using their understanding of Kravax communication protocols, Earth's global network began broadcasting doctored footage, showing Kravax commanders abandoning ground troops during defeats, prioritizing their own evacuation over warrior castes. The footage, while fabricated, tapped directly into the species' primal fear of alpha betrayal. While this psychological operation unfolded, Sub-Commander Krell was undergoing his own transformation. His daily conversations with Dr. Martinez had evolved from hostile interrogation to genuine cultural exchange. The turning point came after witnessing a school group visiting the facility as part of an educational program about the conflict. "Your young are taught about warfare while it occurs?" he asked, mandibles spreading in astonishment as children asked sophisticated questions about Kravax biology and social structures. "We believe in truth, even difficult truth," Martinez explained. "Hiding reality doesn't prepare them for the world." This transparency, antithetical to Kravax information control, fascinated Krell. When Martinez proposed humanitarian treatment for any surrendering Kravax in exchange for tactical information, his initial skepticism was profound. "You would honor such an agreement with an enemy actively trying to conquer your world?" he challenged, compound eyes fixed on her face to detect deception. "That's who we are," Martinez responded simply. "Our capacity for violence doesn't negate our capacity for compassion." This paradox, incomprehensible within Kravax psychology, ultimately convinced Krell. After 3 days of intensive internal struggle, he revealed critical information. The flagship's planet killer weapon, a last-resort technology typically reserved for potential rival species, had a vulnerability during its charging sequence when targeting systems must temporarily deactivate shields to calibrate. As psychological operations and mounting combat losses created unprecedented dissent throughout the Kravax fleet, Zorth made a fateful decision. In a rage-filled command session, he overrode his officers' objections and ordered the deployment of the planet killer. "I will not return to the Dominion as the first failed conqueror," he snarled at his protesting second-in-command. "Either Earth submits or Earth burns." The massive weapon began its charging sequence, a process requiring 12 hours to complete. Unknown to Zorth, Dr. Martinez had already transmitted news of this development through Krell's verified communication codes to key officers in the fleet, many already questioning Zorth's judgment. The message was simple but devastating. Your commander risks galactic censure by using a forbidden weapon against a defensive species. History will judge those who enable planetary genocide. Throughout the Kravax fleet, a crisis of loyalty emerged unlike anything in their military history. The rigid hierarchical psychology that had served them across 47 conquests now worked against them. As officers caught between conflicting imperatives, obedience to command versus adherence to Dominion protocol, experienced cognitive paralysis that humans would recognize as moral conflict. As the planet killer's energy signature became detectable from Earth, humanity prepared for what might be its final stand. But across the planet, there was no panic, no surrender, only grim determination. Earth had discovered something profound about itself during this conflict, that when faced with extinction, The human capacity for cooperation could overcome millennia of division. As Martinez explained to Krell during what might be their final conversation, "If we fall together, fighting for our home. That's something your people might never understand. We don't fight because we expect to win. We fight because some things are worth fighting for, even in defeat." Krell's response surprised her. "Perhaps that is why you will not be defeated." As the planet killer weapon entered its final charging phase, Earth launched Operation Spearpoint, the most daring military action in human history. The plan appeared suicidal, a frontal assault on Zorith's flagship by Earth's remaining conventional forces. Military vessels from dozens of nations converged on the massive Kravax command ship in what seemed to be a desperate last stand. Zorith watched with savage satisfaction as his defenses shredded the approaching human fleet. "See how they finally break," he told his command staff, mandating ship-wide broadcast of the slaughter to restore morale. When faced with extinction, even humans revert to predictable desperation. The losses were horrific, each destroyed vessel representing hundreds of lives. Heroes from nations that had been enemies mere weeks before now dying together in Earth's defense. But their sacrifice served a critical purpose. Every eye on the Kravax flagship was fixed on the frontal assault. None noticed the small stealth vessel approaching from beneath, using the planet's electromagnetic field as cover. The infiltration craft carried the most unlikely strike team ever assembled. Captain Zhang and Colonel Ndlovu led not just special forces operators, but civilian specialists essential to the mission. Dr. Tanaka's expertise in xenophysics, a hacker collective recruited from 5 continents, and engineers specifically trained on Kravax technology. Most surprising of all, Dr. Martinez herself joined the team, wearing hastily adapted combat gear over her researcher's clothing. "I understand their psychology better than anyone," she had insisted during the mission briefing, "and we'll need that when we face Zorith." Using the vulnerability Krell had revealed, the team bypassed the flagship's automated security systems during the planet killer's calibration phase. The infiltration craft attached to the ventral hull, specialized cutting tools creating an entry point near a secondary maintenance conduit. The team fought through the massive vessel, suffering losses but adapting to each challenge. When conventional weapons proved ineffective against internal security drones, the civilian engineers improvised electromagnetic disruptors from ship components. When biometric scanners blocked their advance, Dr. Tanaka reprogrammed captured Kravax devices to broadcast officer signatures. Their entire security architecture assumes hierarchical attack patterns, Zhang observed as they bypassed another checkpoint. "They literally can't program defenses against our collaborative approach." The team finally breached the weapon control chamber just as Zorith completed the firing sequence. The ensuing battle was brief but brutal. Zhang and Ndlovu employed combat techniques specifically designed to counter Kravax physiology, targeting neural implant connection points identified through Krell's intelligence. When Zorith found himself surrounded by soldiers and civilians alike, his incomprehension was total. Why would non-warriors risk themselves in combat? He demanded, genuinely unable to understand as Martinez approached with the override sequence. "Your specialists and knowledge keepers should be preserved behind your warriors, because Earth is all of ours to defend," Martinez explained simply as the team's hackers completed the override. Not just those bred for battle. The planet killer weapon powered down, its targeting systems permanently fused by the override. Through the viewport, they witnessed an even more astounding sight. 3 Kravax destroyers moving to defensive positions around Earth, their commanders having received Krell's evidence of Zorith's violation of Dominion battle protocol. The aftermath transformed galactic politics. News spread rapidly through the Kravax communication network of their unprecedented defeat by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The rigid hierarchy that maintained their empire began to fracture as conquered species, emboldened by Earth's example, rose in coordinated rebellion. Most surprising to the galactic community was Earth's response to victory. Rather than pursuing retribution or conquest, the only outcomes previous conflicts had produced. Humanity offered conditional peace. Earth established itself as a force to be reckoned with, not through dominion, but by creating the Mutual Defense Accord, offering alliance and protection to species seeking independence from conquering empires. Sub-Commander Krell, having witnessed humanity's capacity for both ferocity and mercy, underwent a transformation none could have predicted. His experiences on Earth shattered his species' biological determinism, proving that evolution need not dictate destiny. He became the first ambassador between the species, working to reform Kravac society from within. As for Commander Zorth, his punishment became the subject of fierce debate among Earth's leaders. Many demanded execution for his attempted genocide. In the end, humanity chose a penalty that no Kravacs would have conceived. Rather than death, Zorth was sentenced to live among humans. He became an unwilling but valuable instructor at Earth's new Xenological Defense Academy, his expertise helping prepare the next generation of defenders, while he gradually comprehended the fundamental error of his invasion. He had mistaken humanity's cooperation and compassion for weakness, never realizing these were the very qualities that made Earth the one planet in the galaxy that could not be conquered through force alone. 5 years after the conflict, Dr. Martinez visited Zorth in his specially designed quarters at the Academy. The once fearsome commander had physically diminished, his exoskeleton dulled without the hormonal dominance displays that had once defined his existence. "Have you found what you were looking for?" he asked, his translator rendering the complex Kravak's emotional markers into approximate human concepts. "The understanding you humans seem to value above conquest." Martinez considered her answer carefully. "We didn't defeat you because we were stronger or more advanced," she explained. "We prevailed because we could be both fierce and kind, both individual and unified, both practical and idealistic, all at once. Humans contain contradictions that your species cannot comprehend." "And this makes you superior?" Zorth asked, mandibles tight with residual pride. "Not superior," Martinez corrected gently. "Just different. And in this case, that difference meant survival. The universe needs diversity, Zorth, not just in biology, but in ways of being. That's something worth defending, even against overwhelming odds." As she left, Zorth turned to the viewport overlooking the Academy grounds, where human children played alongside the offspring of former Kravak's enemies and recently liberated species. The scene represented a future his conquering mind could never have imagined, a galaxy where strength came from cooperation rather than domination. For the first time, he began to understand why his 48th conquest had become his last.